The morning sun cast long shadows across Camp Pendleton as Corporal Sarah Chun stepped off the transport truck with her gear bag slung over one shoulder. The California heat was already building, promising another scorching day at the Marine Corps' premier training facility. She adjusted her cover and took a deep breath of the dry desert air, mixed with the familiar sense of gun oil and determination that seemed to permeate every military installation she had ever visited. Sarah had been a Marine for 3 years, but this assignment felt different. She was reporting to the 1st Marine Expeditionary Forces Scout Sniper School, a place where legends were born and careers were either made or destroyed in a matter of weeks. The reputation of this program preceded itself. Only the most exceptional marksmen even receive an invitation to attend, and the washout rate hovered around 70%. As she made her way toward the administrative building, Sarah caught sight of other Marines gathered near the armory. Their conversation carried on the morning breeze, and she could hear the easy camaraderie of soldiers who had already been through the initial phases of training together. These men had been here for weeks, developing the tight bonds that came from shared suffering and mutual respect earned through demonstrated competence under pressure. The group consisted of 8 Marines, all displaying the lean, weathered appearance of men who spent their days crawling through brush, calculating wind speed and bullet drop, and perfecting the art of remaining invisible while delivering precision fire at extreme distances. Their uniforms bore the subtle signs of field work, faded patches where equipment had worn against fabric, and the kind of deep tan that only came from spending countless hours under the unforgiving desert sun. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez emerged from the armory building, clipboard in hand, and called the group to attention. His voice carried the authority of someone who had earned his position through years of proven excellence in one of the military's most demanding specialties. Rodriguez had deployed to Afghanistan 3 times as a sniper, with confirmed kills at ranges that pushed the absolute limits of what was considered possible with standard military equipment. "Listen up, Marines," Rodriguez announced, his eyes scanning the assembled group. "We've got a new addition to the program starting today. Corporal Chun will be joining your class for the advanced marksmanship phase." Sarah approached the group, maintaining the confident bearing that had served her well throughout her military career. She had graduated at the top of her class from basic training, excelled in every military occupational specialty school she had attended, and consistently scored expert on every weapons qualification throughout her service. Her personnel file contained commendations from 3 different commanding officers, each noting her exceptional attention to detail and natural ability with firearms. The reaction from the assembled Marines was immediate and predictable. 8 pairs of eyes turned toward her, taking in her compact 5'4" frame and assessing whether she belonged in their exclusive brotherhood. Sarah had experienced this moment countless times before. The initial sizing up that occurred whenever she entered a new military environment dominated by men who questioned whether a woman could meet the physical and mental demands of combat specialties. "Ma'am," one of the Marines said, his tone respectful, but carrying an undercurrent of skepticism that Sarah recognized immediately. "Have you completed the preliminary phases of sniper training?" "I have," Sarah replied simply, her voice steady and confident. "Completed the stalking course, field craft training, and preliminary marksmanship at Quantico last month." Staff Sergeant Rodriguez consulted his clipboard, then looked up at the group. "Corporal Chun scored in the top 5% of her class during preliminary training. She's here because her instructors recommended her for advanced precision marksmanship training." Despite this endorsement, Sarah could sense the reservations among her new classmates. This was nothing new. She had faced similar attitudes when she first reported to infantry training, when she volunteered for combat engineer school, and when she applied for scout sniper training in the first place. The military was slowly adapting to the reality of women in combat roles, but cultural changes always lag behind policy changes. One Marine, a tall lance corporal with the build of someone who spent his off-duty time in the gym, stepped forward slightly. "No disrespect intended, Corporal, but this training gets pretty intense. The physical demands alone wash out a lot of good Marines. You sure you're ready for what we're going to be doing out here? Sarah met his gaze directly. I'm here for the same reason you are, Lance Corporal. Because my chain of command believes I can do the job. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez intervened before the conversation could develop further. Gentlemen, Corporal Chin's qualifications aren't up for debate. She's earned her place in this program, just like the rest of you. Now, let's get to the armory and draw equipment for today's training. The group began moving toward the weapons storage facility, but Sarah noticed the continued glances and quiet conversations among several of the Marines. She had learned long ago not to let these initial reactions affect her confidence or performance. The military was a meritocracy at its core. Respect was earned through demonstrated competence, not given based on assumptions or preconceptions. Inside the armory, rows of precision rifles lined the walls in locked racks. These weren't the standard M4 carbines that most Marines carried, but specialized weapons designed for accuracy at extreme ranges. The M40A5 sniper rifles represented the pinnacle of military marksmanship technology, capable of placing bullets with surgical precision at distances exceeding 1,000 meters when operated by skilled hands. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez began the weapons draw process, calling each Marine forward to sign for their assigned rifle and optics package. When Sarah's turn came, she approached the counter with the same professional demeanor she maintained in every military situation. Corporal Chun, the armorer called out, consulting his list. Your assigned weapon number 47291. Sarah accepted the paperwork and moved to the designated rack where her rifle waited. As she lifted the weapon, she immediately noticed something that made her pause. The previous user had obviously customized certain elements of the rifle setup, but more significantly, someone had applied pink camouflage tape to portions of the stock and handguard. The pink coloring was subtle, not the bright, attention-grabbing shade that might be found on civilian sporting goods, but a muted, dusty rose color that would actually blend well with certain terrain features common in desert environments. Someone had clearly put thought into this modification, understanding that effective camouflage sometimes required unconventional color choices. Well, one of the Marines commented loudly enough for the entire group to hear. Looks like Shin got the princess rifle. Laughter erupted from several members of the group, the kind of easy humor that often emerged when Marines found something unexpected or amusing. Sarah examined the weapon more closely, running her hands along the modified surfaces and checking the action to ensure everything functioned properly. That weapon belonged to Lieutenant Foster, the armorer explained. She completed the program 6 months ago and requested the modifications. Pink actually works pretty well in certain light conditions, especially during dawn and dusk hours when shadows take on unusual colors. Despite this reasonable explanation, the jokes continued among Sarah's classmates. Marines had always used humor as a way to deal with stress and build group cohesion, but Sarah could tell that some of the comments were intended to test her reaction and see how she handled being the target of attention. Think you can handle a real sniper rifle, Corporal? Lance Corporal Martinez asked, grinning as he hefted his own weapon. That thing looks like it belongs in a toy store, not on a battlefield. Sarah finished her inspection of the rifle, satisfied that all components were properly aligned and functioning correctly. The pink modifications were purely cosmetic. The weapon itself was identical to every other M40A5 in the armory, capable of the same precision and reliability that made it the Marine Corps' standard sniper system. It's a good rifle, Sarah replied calmly, slinging the weapon across her shoulder. Color doesn't affect ballistic performance. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez finished the weapons draw and gathered the group for a brief orientation. Today we're starting long-range precision training. We'll be working on targets at distances up to 800 meters, focusing on environmental factors that affect bullet trajectory at extended ranges. The group moved outside to the vehicles that would transport them to the training range. Sarah found herself walking alongside Corporal Thompson, a quiet Marine from Tennessee who had been friendly but reserved during the armory interaction. "Don't let them get to you," Thompson said quietly. "They're good Marines, but they always test new people. Has nothing to do with you being a woman. They did the same thing to me when I joined the class 2 weeks ago. Sarah appreciated the reassurance, though she had already reached the same conclusion. Military units always had their own culture and traditions, and new members were expected to prove themselves before being fully accepted into the group. The process might involve some good-natured harassment, but it was rarely malicious in intent. I'm not worried about it, Sarah replied. I've been through this before. They'll judge me on my performance, not my gender or my equipment. The convoy of vehicles departed Camp Pendleton and headed toward the training ranges located in the surrounding desert. Sarah watched the landscape pass by through the window, noting the varied terrain features that would affect long-range shooting. Hills, valleys, and rocky outcroppings created complex wind patterns that could deflect bullets from their intended paths, while temperature variations between different elevations affected air density and bullet velocity. Successful sniping required more than just good marksmanship. It demanded a thorough understanding of environmental science, mathematics, and physics. A sniper had to account for factors including wind speed and direction, air temperature and humidity, barometric pressure, target movement, and the Coriolis effect caused by the Earth's rotation. At extreme ranges, even small miscalculations could cause a miss by several feet. The vehicles arrived at the training range after a 30-minute drive through increasingly remote terrain. The facility consisted of multiple firing positions overlooking a valley that contained targets at various distances. Electronic scoring systems provided immediate feedback on shot placement, while meteorological equipment monitored environmental conditions that affected ballistic calculations. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez assembled the group at the primary briefing area, where large charts displayed ballistic data and environmental factors. Gentlemen and Corporal Chun, today we're going to push your limits. We'll start at 600 meters and work our way out to 800. At these distances, environmental factors become critical. A 10-mile-per-hour crosswind can move your bullet 18 inches at 800 meters. Sarah listened carefully as Rodriguez explained the day's training objectives and safety procedures. She had studied ballistics extensively during her preliminary training, but practical application in field conditions always presented new challenges. Each shooting environment was unique, requiring snipers to adapt their techniques and calculations to local conditions. The first phase of training involved establishing a baseline for each Marine's current skill level. Rodriguez assigned shooting positions and directed each sniper to engage targets at 600 meters, using their preferred shooting techniques and environmental calculations. Sarah was assigned to firing position 3, which offered a clear view of the target area, but required accounting for a slight crosswind that created complex air currents as it moved through the valley. She began setting up her equipment, adjusting the bipod legs, and checking the rifle 0 through her scope. As she worked, Sarah could hear comments from the Marines at adjacent positions. The pink modifications to her rifle continued to generate jokes and speculation about her ability to use the weapon effectively. She ignored the commentary and focused on her preparation, just as she had learned to do during countless hours of training and practice. $5 says the Princess rifle can't hit anything beyond 400 meters, she heard Lance Corporal Martinez whisper to his shooting partner. You're on, came the reply. But I'll give her credit for confidence. Takes guts to show up here with gear like that. Sarah completed her equipment setup and began studying the environmental conditions through her scope. The wind was variable, shifting between 8 and 12 miles per hour, with occasional gusts that would require careful timing to achieve accurate shots. Temperature was climbing as the morning progressed, which would affect air density and bullet velocity throughout the training session. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez approached each firing position to verify that safety protocols were being followed and equipment was properly configured. When he reached Sarah's position, he knelt beside her and examined her rifle setup. Everything looks good, Corporal, he said. Remember, at this distance, environmental factors are more important than minor differences in equipment. Focus on your fundamentals and trust your calculations. Understood, Staff Sergeant, Sarah replied, maintaining her focus on the target downrange. Rodriguez moved on to the next position, leaving Sarah to complete her final preparations. She chambered around and settled into her shooting position, controlling her breathing and allowing her heart rate to stabilize. Through her scope, the target appeared as a small silhouette against the desert background, challenging but achievable for a skilled marksman with proper technique. The training was about to begin in earnest, and Sarah knew that her performance over the next few hours would determine how she was perceived by her new classmates. She had faced similar tests throughout her military career, and she understood that respect had to be earned through demonstrated competence rather than demanded based on credentials or qualifications. As she waited for the command to commence firing, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 3 years of military service, countless hours of training and practice, and a determination to excel in one of the most demanding specialties the Marine Corps offered. The pink rifle that had generated so much attention was simply a tool. What mattered was her ability to use it effectively when the situation demanded precision and reliability. The morning sun climbed higher in the desert sky, promising another day of challenging training under demanding conditions. Sarah was ready to meet that challenge, regardless of what her classmates thought about her equipment or her presence in their elite program. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's voice cut through the morning air with military precision. Commence firing. Engage your assigned targets at 600 meters. You have 10 rounds to establish your baseline performance. Sarah settled into her shooting position, feeling the familiar weight of the rifle against her shoulder. The pink modifications that had drawn so much attention from her classmates felt no different than any other sniper system she had used. The weapon was properly zeroed, the scope was clear, and her breathing was controlled and steady. Through her scope, she could see the target clearly, a standard military silhouette positioned at precisely 600 meters according to the range markers. The electronic scoring system would provide immediate feedback on shot placement, measuring accuracy to within fractions of an inch at this distance. She began her environmental calculations, factoring in the variable crosswind that was currently running at approximately 10 miles per hour from left to right. At 600 meters, this would push her bullet roughly 12 inches off target if she didn't compensate properly. The temperature had risen to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, which would affect bullet velocity slightly compared to standard conditions. Sarah adjusted her scope accordingly, dialing in the necessary corrections for both elevation and windage. She had performed these calculations thousands of times during training, but each shot still required careful analysis of current conditions. Successful sniping was as much science as art, requiring both technical knowledge and intuitive feel for how environmental factors affected bullet trajectory. At the adjacent firing positions, she could hear her classmates beginning their own engagements. The sharp crack of rifle fire echoed across the valley as Marines sent rounds downrange toward their assigned targets. The electronic scoring system provided audio feedback when hits were registered, creating a rhythm of shots and confirmations that was familiar to anyone who had spent time on military ranges. Sarah took a deep breath, exhaled halfway, and began her trigger squeeze. The rifle fired with a sharp report, and she immediately began tracking her shot through the scope. At 600 meters, bullet flight time was approximately 0.8 of a second, long enough for her to observe the impact through her optics if she maintained proper shooting form. The electronic scoring system confirmed a hit in the target's center mass, scoring a 9 out of 10 possible points. Sarah made a mental note of the wind conditions and prepared for her second shot, adjusting her scope slightly based on the observed impact of her first round. "Good hit, Chun," Staff Sergeant Rodriguez called out as he monitored the electronic displays that showed each Marine's performance in real time. Center mass, 9 ring. Sarah fired her second round, this time achieving a 10-ring hit as she refined her environmental calculations. The third and fourth shots followed in quick succession, both scoring 10s as she found a rhythm and adjusted to the local conditions. From the positions on either side of her, she could hear varying degrees of success from her classmates. Lance Corporal Martinez was struggling with the crosswind, scoring mostly 7s and 8s despite his obvious effort to compensate for environmental factors. Corporal Thompson was performing well, achieving consistent 9s with occasional 10s. By her 7th shot, Sarah had established a clear pattern of performance. She was consistently hitting the 9 and 10 rings, with her shots grouping tightly in the target's center mass area. The pink rifle that had generated so much commentary was proving itself capable of exceptional accuracy in her hands. Holy shit, she heard someone whisper from a nearby position. Check out Chen's target on the display. Sarah ignored the commentary and focused on her remaining rounds. Each shot required the same careful preparation and execution regardless of how previous shots had performed. Overconfidence had ruined more good shooters than poor equipment ever had. Her 8th shot scored another 10, followed by a 9 that was less than an inch from being perfect. For her final round, Sarah took extra time to ensure her calculations were correct and her shooting position was stable. The wind had shifted slightly, requiring a small adjustment to her scope settings. The 10th shot flew downrange with the same precision as the others, striking the target in the 10 ring and completing her baseline string with an impressive display of marksmanship. When the electronic scoring system tallied her performance, she had achieved an aggregate score of 96 out of a possible 100 points. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez announced the scores for the entire group. Most Marines had scored in the 70s and 80s, which was considered good performance for the challenging conditions. 2 had achieved scores in the low 90s. Sarah's 96 was the highest score of the morning session. Outstanding shooting, Corporal Chun, Rodriguez announced publicly. Best baseline score I've seen this month. The reaction among her classmates was mixed. Some offered congratulations and recognition for genuinely excellent marksmanship, while others seemed surprised that the Marine with the pink rifle had outperformed everyone else in the group. Maybe that color actually does help with camouflage, Corporal Thompson said with a grin. Or maybe Chin's just a damn good shot. Lance Corporal Martinez, who had struggled with his own performance, was less generous in his assessment. 600 meters isn't that impressive. Let's see how she does when we stretch it out to real sniper distances. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez overheard the comment and addressed the group directly. Gentlemen, and Corporal Chun, effective sniping requires consistent accuracy at all ranges. A Marine who can't hit reliably at 600 meters has no business attempting shots at 1,000. Master the fundamentals first, then worry about pushing your limits. The group began preparing for the next phase of training, which would involve engaging targets at 700 meters. At this distance, environmental factors became even more critical, and small errors in calculation or technique would result in significant misses. Sarah began adjusting her scope for the increased range, calculating the additional bullet drop and wind drift that would affect her shots. The mathematics of long-range shooting became increasingly complex as distances increased, requiring snipers to account for factors that were negligible at shorter ranges. At 700 meters, her bullet would drop approximately 40 inches compared to line of sight, requiring significant elevation adjustment on her scope. The crosswind would push her shots nearly 16 inches off target without proper compensation. Additionally, the increased flight time meant that any movement by a live target would require lead calculations to ensure hits. As she prepared for the next string of fire, Sarah noticed that several of her classmates were paying closer attention to her techniques and preparations. The pink rifle might have initially drawn jokes and skeptical comments, but her performance was earning grudging respect from Marines who understood the difficulty of achieving such consistent accuracy. Chun called Corporal Williams, a Marine from her preliminary training class who had arrived at the advanced program 2 weeks earlier. What's your secret with wind reading? I'm struggling to get consistent hits with these crosswinds. Sarah looked up from her scope adjustments. I use a combination of mirage reading and natural indicators like grass movement. The key is finding reference points at different distances and averaging the wind speeds. It's not always the same wind speed at the firing position and the target. She pointed toward the valley where their targets were located. See how the grass is moving differently at 400 meters compared to 600? That tells you the wind is layered, probably 8 miles per hour here at the firing line, but 12 miles per hour downrange. You have to calculate for the average effect over the entire bullet path. Williams nodded appreciatively. That makes sense. I was only reading wind at the firing position. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had been listening to the exchange and moved closer to the group. Corporal Chun raises an excellent point about layered winds. This is advanced environmental reading that separates good snipers from great ones. Most Marines learn to read wind at their position, but professional snipers must understand conditions along the entire bullet path. He gestured toward the valley below them. At extreme ranges, you might encounter 3 or 4 different wind speeds and directions between your position and the target. Learning to read these complex conditions is what makes the difference between a successful engagement and a miss in combat situations. The conversation was interrupted by the range safety officer's announcement that the 700-meter portion of training was about to begin. Sarah returned her attention to her equipment, making final adjustments to her scope and checking her shooting position. This phase of training would be more challenging than the 600-meter baseline. The increased distance meant that environmental factors would have greater effect on bullet trajectory, and the margin for error was correspondingly smaller. A shot that might have been a 9 at 600 meters could easily become a miss at 700 if conditions weren't properly calculated. Sarah chambered her first round and settled into position, studying the target through her scope. At this distance, the silhouette appeared noticeably smaller, requiring more precise aiming and shot placement. The electronic scoring system would still provide immediate feedback, but the targets themselves were more difficult to see and engage effectively. She began her wind reading process, observing grass movement and heat mirage at various points between her position and the target. The wind had increased slightly since the previous string of fire, now running at approximately 12 miles per hour with occasional gusts that could reach 15 miles per hour. Based on her calculations, Sarah adjusted her scope for both the increased range and the stronger wind conditions. At 700 meters, the wind would push her bullets approximately 20 inches off target without proper compensation. She dialed in the necessary corrections and prepared for her first shot. The rifle fired with its familiar sharp report, and Sarah tracked the bullet's impact through her scope. The electronic scoring system registered a hit in the 9 ring, slightly left of center mass. She had undercorrected for the wind effect, a common error when transitioning to longer ranges. Sarah adjusted her scope slightly and fired her second round, this time achieving a perfect 10 as her wind reading improved with observation of her first shot's impact. The third and fourth shots followed with similar precision, both scoring 10s as she refined her technique for the local conditions. From the adjacent positions, she could hear that her classmates were having varying degrees of success with the increased distance. The complexity of 700-meter shots was evident in the electronic scoring system's audio feedback, with fewer hits being registered and more shots missing the target entirely. "Damn," she heard Lance Corporal Martinez mutter after his fourth shot. "I can't seem to get the wind call right at this distance." Sarah continued her string of fire, achieving consistent scores in the 9 and 10 rings. By her 8th shot, she had established another pattern of excellent performance, with most of her rounds grouping tightly in the target's center mass area. Her final 2 shots both scored 10s, completing another impressive display of marksmanship under challenging conditions. When the scores were tallied, Sarah had achieved 94 out of 100 points at 700 meters, once again posting the highest score among the group. The pattern of her success was becoming undeniable to her classmates. This wasn't luck or favorable conditions. Sarah was consistently demonstrating superior marksmanship skills with the same equipment and environmental factors that everyone else was using. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez announced the scores and made his assessment of the group's performance. Overall, good shooting at a challenging distance. Several Marines showed significant improvement in their wind reading and environmental calculations. Corporal Chun continues to demonstrate exceptional marksmanship with a score of 94. The comments from her classmates were noticeably different now than they had been during the morning armory period. The jokes about the pink rifle had largely disappeared, replaced by recognition of genuine skill and requests for advice on technique and environmental reading. "Chun, you're making the rest of us look bad," Corporal Thompson said with a grin that contained no malice. "Where did you learn to read wind like that?" Sarah finished cleaning her rifle before responding. "Practice, mostly. I grew up hunting in Montana, where wind is always a factor. My father taught me to pay attention to natural indicators and to never take the same wind call twice without rechecking conditions." Lance Corporal Martinez, who had been skeptical earlier in the day, approached her position with obvious curiosity. "Mind if I ask about your scope settings? I'm having trouble with my elevation calculations at these distances." Sarah was happy to share her techniques and knowledge with a fellow Marine who was genuinely interested in improving his performance. The military's culture of shared learning and mutual support had always been one of its greatest strengths, and she had benefited from countless other service members who had been willing to help her develop her own skills. As the group prepared for the final phase of training, Sarah reflected on how dramatically the morning's dynamic had changed. The initial skepticism and jokes about her pink rifle had given way to respect earned through demonstrated competence. This was exactly how she had hoped the day would progress. Not through arguments or confrontations, but through the simple process of performing her job excellently and letting her results speak for themselves. The afternoon session would involve engaging targets at 800 meters, pushing the limits of what was considered standard engagement range for Marine sniper teams. At this distance, environmental factors would be critical, and even small errors in calculation or technique could result in complete misses. It would be the ultimate test of everything she had learned about long-range marksmanship and environmental analysis. The afternoon sun had reached its peak intensity, creating challenging conditions for long-range marksmanship as heat waves shimmered across the desert valley. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez gathered the group for a briefing on the final phase of training, engaging targets at 800 meters, a distance that would test every aspect of their sniper skills. "Listen up, Marines," Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying easily across the firing line. 800 meters is where environmental factors become critical. At this distance, a 5-degree temperature change can affect your point of impact by 3 inches. A 2-mile-per-hour error in wind reading can cause a complete miss. Sarah listened carefully as Rodriguez explained the complexities of extreme-range shooting. At 800 meters, bullet drop would be approximately 70 inches compared to line of sight, requiring substantial scope adjustments. The flight time would exceed 1 second, meaning that any target movement would require significant lead calculations. More challenging than the ballistics, however, were the environmental factors that became increasingly important at extended ranges. Heat mirage could make target identification difficult, while layered wind conditions along the bullet's flight path required sophisticated reading techniques that went far beyond simple observation of local conditions. "The heat index is climbing toward 100 degrees, Rodriguez continued. "This will create significant mirage effects that can distort your target picture and make range estimation more difficult. You'll need to use techniques for shooting through mirage without losing sight picture quality." Sarah began preparing her equipment for the 800-meter engagement, starting with scope adjustments for the increased range. The mathematics of long-range shooting became exponentially more complex as distances increased, requiring precise calculations that accounted for multiple variables simultaneously. She calculated the necessary elevation adjustment, factoring in the current temperature of 92 degrees Fahrenheit and barometric pressure of 30.15 inches of mercury. The bullet would experience significant drop over the extended flight path, requiring her to aim nearly 6 feet above the actual target to achieve center mass hits. Wind reading at this distance required analyzing conditions at multiple points along the bullet's trajectory. Sarah observed grass movement and heat mirage at 200-meter intervals, noting variations in wind speed and direction that would affect her bullet's path at different points during its flight. At her firing position, the wind was running approximately 8 miles per hour from left to right. At 400 meters, it appeared to increase to 12 miles per hour, while at 600 meters the direction shifted slightly more toward a quartering wind. At the target location, 800 meters distant, the wind seemed to decrease back to approximately 10 miles per hour. These layered wind conditions required averaging calculations that went beyond simple linear compensation. Sarah had to estimate the cumulative effect of different wind speeds and directions acting on her bullet during various portions of its flight time. Complex wind patterns today, observed Corporal Thompson from the adjacent firing position. Looks like the thermal currents are creating some interesting effects downrange. Sarah nodded in agreement. The heat is creating updrafts in the valley that are interacting with the prevailing wind. We'll need to account for both horizontal and vertical deflection at this distance. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had been observing the environmental conditions and made an announcement to the group. Due to the challenging wind patterns, we're going to extend the time limit for this exercise. Take whatever time you need to properly read conditions and make your calculations. At 800 meters, rushing your shot preparation is a guarantee of poor performance. Sarah appreciated the additional time allowance. Extreme range shooting couldn't be hurried. Successful snipers understood that careful preparation was more important than rapid engagement when precision was the primary requirement. She continued her environmental analysis, using her scope to study heat mirage patterns that would indicate wind direction and speed at various distances. Mirage reading was an advanced technique that required considerable experience to master, but it provided invaluable information about atmospheric conditions that couldn't be obtained through simple observation. At 800 meters, the target appeared significantly smaller through her scope, requiring precise aiming and shot placement. The electronic scoring system would still provide immediate feedback, but the increased distance meant that even small errors in calculation or technique could result in complete misses rather than reduced scores. Sarah chambered her first round and settled into her shooting position, taking extra time to ensure her body position was stable and her natural point of aim was properly aligned. At this distance, minor inconsistencies in shooting form could cause significant variations in shot placement. She controlled her breathing and allowed her heart rate to stabilize, then began her final wind reading before taking the shot. The mirage patterns indicated relatively stable conditions for the moment, though she knew they could change quickly in the desert environment. Sarah began her trigger squeeze, applying steady pressure until the rifle fired with its characteristic sharp report. Through her scope, she tracked the bullet's flight path and observed its impact on the target. The electronic scoring system registered a hit in the 8 ring, slightly high and left of center mass. The shot placement indicated that she had slightly undercorrected for both wind drift and bullet drop. At 800 meters, small errors in calculation became magnified, turning what might have been a perfect shot at shorter ranges into a marginal hit. Sarah analyzed her first shot's impact and made adjustments to her scope settings, correcting for the observed errors in her environmental calculations. Her second shot flew downrange with improved accuracy, striking the target in the 9 ring as her corrections proved more accurate. From the positions around her, she could hear varying degrees of success and frustration as her classmates struggled with the challenging conditions. 800 meters was pushing the limits of standard military sniper training, and several Marines were experiencing difficulty achieving consistent hits at this distance. Missing high and right, Lance Corporal Martinez announced after his third shot. I think I'm overcorrecting for the wind. Try reading the mirage at the 600-meter mark, Sarah suggested during a break in firing. It looks like the wind is stronger in the middle portion of the bullet path than at either end. Martinez nodded appreciatively and began studying the heat patterns through his scope. The willingness to share techniques and knowledge was part of the military's culture of mutual support, and Sarah had always benefited from other Marines who were willing to help her improve her performance. Sarah's third and fourth shots both scored 10s as she refined her environmental calculations and settled into a consistent shooting rhythm. The pink rifle continued to perform flawlessly, demonstrating that equipment color had no effect on precision or reliability. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was monitoring all positions through the electronic scoring displays, and Sarah could see him paying particular attention to her consistent performance. At 800 meters, achieving multiple 10-ring hits required exceptional skill and environmental reading ability. Corporal Chun, Rodriguez called out during a pause in the firing sequence. "Walk me through your wind reading process. I want the other Marines to hear your technique." Sarah looked up from her scope and addressed the group. "I'm reading wind at 4 different points along the bullet path. Here at the firing position, at 200 meters, at 400 meters, and at the target. The key is understanding that wind affects your bullet differently during various portions of its flight." She pointed toward the valley below them. Early in the flight path, when the bullet is moving fastest, wind has less effect per unit of time. Later in the flight, when the bullet has slowed down, the same wind speed will cause more deflection. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. That's advanced wind reading technique that most Marines don't learn until they've been in the field for months. Continue with your explanation. "I'm also reading the mirage patterns to understand vertical wind components," Sarah continued. "Heat rising from the valley floor creates updrafts that can cause vertical deflection, especially at extreme ranges where flight time is extended." Several Marines took notes on her technique, recognizing that she was sharing knowledge that could significantly improve their own performance. The military's emphasis on continuous learning and skill development meant that any Marine who could contribute to the group's overall competence was valued regardless of their background or experience level. Sarah returned to her shooting, achieving another 10 with her 5th shot as her environmental calculations proved increasingly accurate. Her 6th and 7th shots continued the pattern of excellent performance, both scoring 9s that were less than 2 inches from perfect hits. By this point in the exercise, her consistent success had completely changed the dynamic among her classmates. The jokes about the pink rifle had been replaced by genuine admiration for her marksmanship skills and requests for advice on technique improvement. "Chen's making this look easy," Corporal Williams commented to his shooting partner. "I've never seen anyone shoot this consistently at 800 meters during training." Sarah fired her 8th shot, achieving another 10 and maintaining her pattern of exceptional accuracy. The electronic scoring system confirmed that she was significantly outperforming everyone else in the group, with most of her rounds grouped tightly in the target center mass area. For her 9th shot, Sarah took extra time to ensure her calculations were correct and her shooting position was perfectly stable. The wind had shifted slightly, requiring a minor adjustment to her scope settings to maintain accuracy. The shot flew downrange with precision, striking the target in the 10 ring and continuing her impressive display of long-range marksmanship. Sarah prepared for her final round, knowing that consistent performance throughout the entire string of fire was more important than any single exceptional shot. Her 10th and final shot completed another outstanding performance, scoring a 9 that was barely outside the 10 ring. When the electronic scoring system tallied her results, Sarah had achieved 92 out of 100 points at 800 meters, once again posting the highest score of the day. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez announced the final scores to the group. Most Marines had struggled with the 800-meter distance, scoring in the 60s and 70s due to the challenging environmental conditions. Only 2 had achieved scores above 80 points, and Sarah's 92 was exceptional for the conditions. "Outstanding performance today," Corporal Chun, Rodriguez announced publicly. 92 points at 800 meters in challenging wind conditions is professional-level marksmanship. That's the kind of shooting that saves lives in combat situations. The recognition from Staff Sergeant Rodriguez carried significant weight with the other Marines in the group. Rodriguez had deployed multiple times as a combat sniper and had earned his position through demonstrated excellence in one of the military's most demanding specialties. Lance Corporal Martinez, who had been skeptical of Sarah's abilities earlier in the day, approached her position as the exercise concluded. I owe you an apology, Corporal. When I saw the pink rifle this morning, I made assumptions about your capabilities. That was wrong of me. Sarah accepted the apology graciously. No offense taken, Martinez. We all make initial judgments based on appearances. What matters is being willing to change our minds when presented with new information. Corporal Thompson joined the conversation, clearly impressed by Sarah's performance throughout the day. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Those scores would be impressive for Marines with years of sniper experience. Practice and good instruction, Sarah replied. I've been fortunate to learn from some excellent teachers, both in the military and before I enlisted. The fundamentals are the same regardless of the distance. It's just a matter of applying them consistently. As the group began cleaning their weapons and preparing for the return trip to Camp Pendleton, Sarah reflected on how completely the day's dynamic had changed. The morning's skepticism about her presence in the program had been replaced by recognition of genuine skill and acceptance as a valued member of the team. The pink rifle that had initially drawn jokes and dismissive comments was now viewed as simply another tool in the hands of a skilled professional. Color, gender, and preconceptions had all proven irrelevant when measured against actual performance under challenging conditions. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez approached Sarah as she finished cleaning her rifle. Corporal Chun, I'd like to speak with you about advanced training opportunities. Performance like you've demonstrated today opens doors to specialized programs that might interest you. Sarah looked up from her equipment with curiosity. What kind of programs, Staff Sergeant? There's a special operations unit that's looking for snipers with exceptional long-range capabilities, Rodriguez explained. They operate in environments where standard engagement distances don't apply. Your performance today suggests you might be a good fit for their requirements. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the transport vehicles that would return the group to Camp Pendleton. Sarah gathered her equipment and joined her classmates for the ride back to base, knowing that this day had marked a significant milestone in her military career. As the convoy departed the training range, she could hear animated discussions among the Marines about the day's shooting and the techniques they had learned. The shared experience of challenging training had bonded the group together, and Sarah was now clearly accepted as an integral part of the team. The pink rifle lay across her lap during the journey back to base, no longer a source of amusement or skepticism, but simply a precision instrument that had performed flawlessly in the hands of a skilled operator. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and training opportunities, but today had established her credentials beyond any reasonable doubt. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah's exceptional performance during the 800-meter training exercise. Word of her marksmanship skills had spread throughout the Scout Sniper School, earning her recognition from instructors and respect from fellow Marines who had initially questioned her presence in the program. The advanced training phase was nearing its conclusion, and the final exercise would test every skill the Marines had developed during their weeks of intensive instruction. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had designed a comprehensive evaluation that would push each sniper to their absolute limits while simulating the complex challenges they might face in actual combat situations. Today's exercise is different from anything we've done before, Rodriguez announced to the assembled group during the pre-dawn briefing. You'll be engaging multiple targets at various distances, from 400 meters out to 1,000 meters. Environmental conditions will be challenging, and you'll have limited time to complete all engagements. Sarah listened carefully as Rodriguez outlined the exercise parameters. Each Marine would work individually, moving between different firing positions to engage targets that required different techniques and calculations. The scoring would be cumulative, based on both accuracy and time to completion. 1,000 meters represents the absolute limit of effective engagement range for your equipment under ideal conditions, Rodriguez continued. Today's conditions are far from ideal. Heat index will reach 105 degrees, winds are variable and unpredictable, and mirage effects will be severe. The group had been reduced from the original 8 Marines to 6, as 2 had been eliminated during previous training phases for failure to meet minimum performance standards. Those who remained represented the most capable snipers in the current class, each having demonstrated exceptional skill and dedication throughout the program. Sarah had consistently posted the highest scores during every training exercise, but she knew that past performance wouldn't guarantee success during the final evaluation. Each shot would need to be earned through careful preparation and flawless execution under pressure. The exercise area encompassed several square miles of desert terrain, with targets positioned at carefully surveyed distances ranging from 400 to 1,000 meters. Each Marine would receive a map showing target locations and a time limit of 4 hours to complete all engagements. You'll start at position Alpha and work your way through the course sequentially, Rodriguez explained. Transportation between positions is on foot, carrying all your equipment. This tests not only your marksmanship, but your physical conditioning and ability to maintain accuracy while fatigued. Sarah shouldered her equipment pack, which contained ammunition, water, and the additional gear required for extended field operations. The pink rifle was slung across her back, its distinctive coloring no longer drawing comments or attention from her fellow Marines. The starting position offered a view across the valley toward the first target, positioned at a measured distance of 400 meters. This would be the easiest engagement of the day, designed to allow each Marine to verify their equipment zero and establish baseline performance before moving to more challenging targets. Sarah began her initial environmental assessment, noting that wind conditions were already complex despite the early hour. Temperature was climbing rapidly as the sun rose higher, promising the kind of heat that would create significant mirage effects by midday. She set up her rifle and scope, checking her equipment systematically before beginning the first engagement. At 400 meters, environmental factors would be manageable, but proper technique was still essential for achieving the accuracy required by the exercise standards. Her first shot struck the target in the 10 ring, confirming that her rifle zero was correct and her environmental calculations were accurate for the current conditions. Sarah packed her equipment efficiently and began the movement to position Bravo, where the 500-meter target waited. The movement between positions required careful navigation across rough terrain while carrying full equipment loads. Sarah maintained a steady pace that would allow her to complete all engagements within the time limit while conserving energy for the more demanding long-range shots. Position Bravo required engaging a target at 500 meters from a different angle, which meant recalculating environmental factors based on the new geometry. Wind direction remained consistent, but the changed shooting position altered how atmospheric conditions would affect bullet trajectory. Sarah's second engagement resulted in another 10-ring hit, maintaining her pattern of exceptional accuracy as she progressed through the course. The movement to position Charlie took longer due to increasingly difficult terrain, but she arrived with sufficient time to properly prepare for the 600-meter shot. Each engagement required complete setup and calculation as if it were the first shot of the day. Successful snipers understood that complacency and assumptions led to poor performance, regardless of how many previous shots had been successful. The 600-meter target at position Charlie presented additional challenges due to its location in a valley where heat mirage was already becoming problematic. Sarah spent extra time reading environmental conditions before taking her shot, which once again found the 10 ring. As she moved toward position Delta, Sarah could see other Marines at various points throughout the course. Some were struggling with the time constraints, while others were having difficulty maintaining accuracy as environmental conditions became more challenging with the rising temperature. Position Delta required engaging a target at 700 meters, the distance where environmental factors began to dominate shot placement calculations. Sarah arrived at the firing position with sweat beading on her forehead from the combination of physical exertion and increasing heat. She took time to cool down and stabilize her heart rate before beginning her equipment setup. At 700 meters, any physical instability would translate directly into reduced accuracy, making proper shot preparation even more critical. The wind had increased in strength and become more variable since her earlier engagements. Sarah observed grass movement and mirage patterns at multiple points along the bullet's flight path, calculating the complex interactions between different wind speeds and directions. Her fourth shot of the day struck slightly left of center, scoring a 9 instead of the perfect 10s she had achieved at shorter ranges. The miss reminded her that 700 meters represented a significant step up in difficulty, where small errors in calculation or technique resulted in meaningful reductions in accuracy. Sarah analyzed her shot placement and adjusted her environmental calculations before moving to position echo, where the 800-meter target would test skills she had demonstrated during previous training exercises. The movement required climbing a steep hill while carrying her full equipment load, adding physical stress to the mental demands of long-range shooting. Position echo offered an elevated firing position that provided excellent visibility toward the target, but created complex wind patterns as air currents moved up the hillside. Sarah spent considerable time analyzing these conditions before setting up a rifle. At 800 meters, her bullet would experience significant drop and drift during its extended flight time. Sarah calculated the necessary scope adjustments and prepared for what would be one of the most challenging shots of her military career to this point. Her fifth engagement resulted in a 10-ring hit, demonstrating that her earlier training and preparation had prepared her well for the demands of extreme-range shooting under field conditions. The success boosted her confidence as she prepared for the final and most difficult target. The movement to position Foxtrot required descending the hill and crossing nearly a mile of rough terrain to reach the final firing position. Sarah maintained her steady pace while monitoring her watch to ensure she would have sufficient time for proper preparation of the 1,000-meter shot. Position Foxtrot was located on a ridge that overlooked the entire valley where the previous targets had been positioned. The 1,000-meter target was barely visible through the heat mirage that now shimmered across the landscape as midday temperatures peaked. At 1,000 meters, Sarah would be shooting at the absolute limit of her equipment's effective range under ideal conditions. Current conditions were far from ideal, with heat index exceeding 100 degrees and wind patterns that defied simple calculation. She began her environmental assessment, understanding that this shot would require every technique she had learned during months of training. At 1,000 meters, bullet flight time would exceed 1.5 seconds, while bullet drop would require aiming nearly 10 feet above the actual target. Wind effects at this distance were equally dramatic. A 10-mile-per-hour crosswind would push her bullet approximately 40 inches off target without proper compensation. The layered wind conditions she was observing would require complex averaging calculations to achieve acceptable accuracy. Sarah spent nearly 30 minutes preparing for the final shot, studying environmental conditions through her scope and making careful calculations based on observed atmospheric effects. At 1,000 meters, rushing the preparation would virtually guarantee a miss. She chambered her final round and settled into her shooting position, controlling her breathing and allowing her heart rate to stabilize after the physical exertion of the morning's movements. Through her scope, the target appeared as a small dot dancing in the heat mirage. Sarah began her trigger squeeze, applying steady pressure while maintaining perfect sight alignment and natural point of aim. The rifle fired with its familiar sharp report, and she tracked the bullet's impact through her scope despite the challenging visibility conditions. The electronic scoring system took several seconds to register the hit due to the extreme distance, but eventually confirmed that her bullet had struck the target in the 9-ring. At 1,000 meters under the prevailing conditions, a 9-ring hit represented exceptional marksmanship. Sarah gathered her equipment and began the movement back to the assembly area, where Marines would report their completion of the exercise and receive their final scores. She had completed all 6 engagements within the time limit while maintaining excellent accuracy throughout. As she walked across the desert terrain, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her situation had changed since that first morning when her classmates had joked about the pink rifle. 3 weeks of consistent exceptional performance had earned her recognition as the most skilled marksman in the current class. The final scoring would determine class rankings and potential recommendations for advanced training opportunities. Sarah was confident that her performance throughout the program had demonstrated her capabilities beyond any reasonable doubt, but she understood that final evaluation results would determine her future options. When she arrived at the assembly area, several of her classmates were already present and comparing their experiences during the challenging exercise. The conversation was animated but respectful, with genuine appreciation for the difficulty of what they had all attempted. "How did you do on the 1,000-meter shot?" Corporal Thompson asked as Sarah joined the group. "I could barely see the target through all that mirage." "Managed a 9, Sarah replied. Conditions were definitely challenging at that distance. Lance Corporal Martinez shook his head in amazement. "A 9 at 1,000 meters in this heat? I was happy to hit the target at all. You're making the rest of us look like amateurs." Staff Sergeant Rodriguez emerged from the scoring station with final results in hand. His expression was serious as he prepared to announce the rankings that would determine each Marine's future in the sniper program and potential recommendations for specialized assignments. "Gentlemen, and Corporal Chun," Rodriguez began, "you have all completed one of the most demanding marksmanship evaluations in the Marine Corps. Your performance today will determine not only your graduation from this program, but your eligibility for advanced opportunities." Sarah listened carefully as Rodriguez prepared to reveal the final scores that would mark the conclusion of her advanced sniper training and potentially open doors to specialized assignments that few Marines ever had the opportunity to pursue. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez held the clipboard containing the final evaluation scores as the 6 remaining Marines stood in formation under the blazing afternoon sun. The completion of the 1,000-meter exercise marked the end of the most demanding phase of sniper training, and these results would determine each Marine's future in the program. "Before I announce the final scores," Rodriguez began, his voice carrying the gravity that came with career-defining moments, "I want you to understand what you've accomplished. This program has a 70% attrition rate. The 6 Marines standing here represent the top tier of marksmanship capability in the Marine Corps." Sarah maintained her position at attention, but she could feel the tension among her classmates as they waited to learn their fate. Months of intensive training had led to this moment, and the scores would determine not only graduation, but potential selection for specialized assignments that could define their military careers. "The passing score for this evaluation is 75 points out of 100, Rodriguez continued. "Scores above 90 indicate exceptional performance that qualifies Marines for immediate deployment with operational units. Scores above 95 are considered professional sniper level." He consulted his clipboard and began reading the results in alphabetical order. "Corporal Chun, your cumulative score for the final evaluation is 98 points. Outstanding performance." Sarah felt a surge of pride and relief as Rodriguez announced her score. 98 points represented nearly perfect execution under extremely challenging conditions, validating months of preparation and training. Corporal Thompson, 87 points. "Excellent work," Rodriguez continued. Thompson's face showed visible relief at achieving a score well above the passing threshold. Lance Corporal Martinez, 82 points. "Strong performance under pressure." Martinez nodded appreciatively, having overcome his earlier struggles with wind reading to achieve a respectable final score. Rodriguez continued through the remaining Marines, with scores ranging from 79 to 89 points. All 6 had successfully completed the program, but Sarah's 98 was significantly higher than anyone else's performance. "Corporal Chun," Rodriguez announced after completing the score announcements, "your 98 is the highest score recorded in this program in over 2 years. More significantly, you achieved perfect scores on both the 800-meter and 1,000-meter engagements, which is extraordinary under the environmental conditions you faced." The recognition from Rodriguez carried special weight because of his own distinguished record as a combat sniper. His 3 deployments to Afghanistan had included several confirmed kills at distances exceeding 1,000 meters, establishing him as one of the Marine Corps' most experienced long-range marksmen. Additionally, Rodriguez continued, "your consistent performance throughout the entire program has been exceptional. You posted the highest scores in every training exercise, demonstrated superior environmental reading skills, and showed excellent leadership in sharing techniques with your fellow Marines. Sarah appreciated the recognition, but she also understood that her journey was just beginning. Advanced sniper training opened doors to specialized assignments and operational units that few Marines ever had the opportunity to join. All 6 Marines have successfully completed advanced sniper training and are qualified for deployment with operational units, Rodriguez announced. However, Corporal Chun and Corporal Thompson have achieved scores that qualify them for consideration for special operations assignments. The mention of special operations opportunities caught Sarah's attention immediately. These assignments represented the pinnacle of military service, involving missions that required the highest levels of skill, training, and reliability. Rodriguez dismissed the group with instructions to report for final administrative processing, but he asked Sarah to remain behind for a private conversation. As her classmates departed, she wondered what additional opportunities might be available based on her exceptional performance. Corporal Chun, Rodriguez began once they were alone. I've been in communication with several units that have expressed interest in your capabilities. Your performance has attracted attention at levels far above the normal sniper school chain of command. Sarah listened carefully as Rodriguez outlined potential assignment options that would take her far beyond standard Marine sniper duties. The opportunities ranged from specialized training programs to immediate deployment with elite units conducting sensitive missions. The first option is assignment to the Special Operations Training Group at Quantico, Rodriguez explained. This would involve 6 months of advanced training in specialized techniques, followed by deployment with Marine Special Operations Command units. The prospect of joining Marine Special Operations Command represented an opportunity that few Marines ever received. These units conducted the most challenging and sensitive missions, requiring personnel with exceptional skills and absolute reliability. The second option is more immediate, Rodriguez continued. There's a joint operations unit that conducts long-range reconnaissance missions in challenging environments. They need a sniper with your level of precision for an upcoming deployment. Sarah considered both options carefully. The advanced training program would provide additional skills and qualifications that could benefit her throughout her career, while the immediate deployment would offer real-world application of her training under operational conditions. What type of missions would the Joint Operations Unit be conducting? Sarah asked, seeking to understand the specific requirements and challenges she might face. I can't discuss operational details, Rodriguez replied, but I can tell you that they operate in environments where standard engagement procedures don't apply. Your demonstrated ability to achieve precision at extreme ranges under challenging conditions makes you an ideal candidate. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a staff car carrying a Marine officer that Sarah didn't recognize. The vehicle's official markings indicated that it came from Marine Corps headquarters, suggesting that her performance had indeed attracted high-level attention. Lieutenant Colonel Williams emerged from the staff car and approached Rodriguez and Sarah. His uniform displayed the ribbons and badges that indicated extensive combat experience and specialized qualifications that went far beyond standard Marine assignments. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Williams said, returning Rodriguez's salute. I'm here to discuss assignment opportunities with Corporal Chun. Sarah came to attention as Lieutenant Colonel Williams turned his attention to her. Corporal Chun, your performance in the sniper program has been brought to my attention by several sources. We have an immediate need for a sniper with your demonstrated capabilities. Williams consulted a folder he was carrying and continued. Your scores throughout the program indicate exceptional marksmanship ability, but equally important is your demonstrated ability to perform under pressure and adapt to challenging conditions. The lieutenant colonel's presence at a training facility to personally discuss assignment opportunities was highly unusual, suggesting that whatever mission or unit he represented was of significant importance to Marine Corps operations. I'm authorized to offer you assignment to a classified program that conducts specialized reconnaissance missions, Williams explained. The assignment would begin immediately upon completion of additional security clearance processing. Sarah understood that classified assignments often provided opportunities for professional development and career advancement that weren't available through normal channels. However, such assignments also carried increased responsibilities and risks. What would be the duration of this assignment, sir? Sarah asked, seeking to understand the long-term implications of accepting such an opportunity. Initial assignment will be 18 months, Williams replied. Extensions will be possible based on operational requirements and your performance. However, I should mention that this assignment would involve deployment to locations where your marksmanship skills would be tested under conditions far more challenging than anything you've experienced during training. The prospect of applying her skills under actual operational conditions was both exciting and sobering. Sarah had trained extensively for such opportunities, but she understood that real-world missions involve complexities and dangers that couldn't be fully replicated during training exercises. The unit operates independently in small teams, Williams continued. You would be working with other specially selected personnel, including snipers from other service branches. Mission success often depends on the kind of precision you've demonstrated throughout your training. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had been listening to the conversation with obvious interest in Sarah's response. Sir, if I may, Rodriguez interjected. Corporal Chen's performance has been exceptional throughout the program. Her technical skills are matched by her professionalism and leadership qualities. Williams nodded appreciatively. Those recommendations were part of what brought her to our attention. We've reviewed her entire service record, and everything indicates that she would be an excellent fit for our requirements. Sarah considered the offer carefully. The opportunity to serve with a specialized unit conducting important missions was exactly the kind of assignment she had hoped her training might lead to. However, she also understood that such opportunities came with significant personal and professional commitments. I would like to accept the assignment, sir, Sarah replied after careful consideration. When would I need to report for duty? Security clearance processing will take approximately 3 weeks, Williams explained. During that time, you'll remain here at Camp Pendleton for additional specialized training that will prepare you for the specific requirements of your new assignment. Lieutenant Colonel Williams handed Sarah a folder containing preliminary assignment documents and contact information. Congratulations, Corporal Chun. Your exceptional performance has earned you an opportunity that few Marines ever receive. As Williams departed in his staff car, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her military career had changed in a matter of months. The journey that had begun with jokes about a pink rifle had led to recognition as one of the Marine Corps' most capable snipers and selection for a classified assignment with an elite unit. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez approached Sarah as she reviewed the assignment documents. Corporal Chun, I've been training snipers for 8 years, and I've never seen anyone demonstrate the level of skill you've shown throughout this program. You've earned this opportunity through exceptional performance and dedication. Sarah looked across the training range where she had spent countless hours perfecting her marksmanship skills. The pink rifle that had initially drawn skeptical comment from her classmates had proven itself capable of extraordinary precision in the hands of a skilled operator. Thank you for the training and guidance, Staff Sergeant, Sarah replied. This program has prepared me well for whatever challenges lie ahead. As the afternoon sun began to set over Camp Pendleton, Sarah gathered her equipment for the final time as a student in the Advanced Sniper program. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and responsibilities as she prepared for assignment to a specialized unit that would test her skills under conditions she could barely imagine. The pink rifle was secured in its case, ready for whatever missions awaited. The color that had once generated jokes and skepticism was now simply part of the equipment carried by one of the Marine Corps' most capable snipers. Sarah's journey from facing initial doubt to earning recognition as an exceptional marksman had demonstrated that performance, not appearance or preconceptions, determined a Marine's value to their unit and their corps. The precision she had achieved during training would soon be tested under operational conditions where Liz might depend on her ability to place bullets exactly where they needed to be. As she walked toward her barracks for the final time as a student, Sarah knew that her real education was just beginning. The advanced training she had completed was merely preparation for the challenges that awaited with her new assignment, where her skills would be tested under conditions that would prove whether she truly belonged among the military's elite marksmen. The 1,000-meter shot that had concluded her evaluation had been perfect preparation for a future where extreme range precision might mean the difference between mission success and failure. Sarah Chun was ready for whatever challenges that future might hold.